Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are diving into a fascinating and science fiction like question. Can we actually combine the DNA of two different creatures, say human DNA and dinosaur DNA, and make a brand new creature? It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But with advances in genetics, CRISPR, and cloning, it's a question that's worth exploring. So let's break it down. What would happen if we tried mixing DNA from two completely different species, like humans and dinosaurs? Understanding DNA basics. To start, let's talk a little bit about DNA. DNA is essentially the blueprint of life. It's a molecule in almost every cell that contains all the genetic instruction for building and maintaining an organism. You inherit your DNA from your parents, and it determines things like your height, eye color, and even some of your personality traits. DNA is made up of four main building blocks called bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. The order of these bases forms a code that instructs cell on how to function and develop. So, in theory, if we wanted to create a new creature using DNA from two different species, we had need to somehow mix their DNA in a way that both sets of genetic instructions could work together. Mixing DNA, how possible is it? Now, here is the big question. Can we mix DNA from two different species like a human and a dinosaur? The short answer is not really. At least not in the way you might imagine. DNA from different species doesn't just combine easily. Most species, even ones that are quite similar, have DNA that's arranged in completely different ways. Think of it like trying to combine two different languages into one sentence. You might get a few words that make sense, but mostly it would be confusing mess. Scientists try to mix DNA. They typically use a technique called genetic engineering. This is where scientists insert small segments of DNA from one species into another. But even with this method, we are usually talking about adding just one or two genes, not creating an entirely new creature. It's a bit like adding a new feature to a car, like a better GPS system, but you are not rebuilding the whole car from scratch. DNA extraction and the dinosaur problem. Alright, so if we were serious about using dinosaur DNA, the first challenge would be to actually get it. But that is the issue. Dinosaur DNA is incredibly hard to find, if it even exists at all. Dinosaurs went extinct about 66 million years ago, and DNA molecules are pretty fragile. They break down over time due to factors like temperature, radiation, and bacterial decay. Scientists have actually tried looking for dinosaur DNA by studying fossils and amber preserved remains. But so far, they haven't found any usable samples. The oldest DNA ever discovered is around a million years old, which is far too recent to belong to a dinosaur. Even if we somehow found a well-preserved dinosaur DNA sample, it would actually be very damaged and incomplete. That's like trying to put together a book with only half the pages. You would be missing too much information to understand the full story. Let's say we add the DNA, then what? But let's say, just for fun, that we somehow had a perfect sample of dinosaur DNA. The next problem would be figuring out how to combine it with human DNA. Here is where things get really tricky. DNA has to work within a specific cell environment, meaning that human cells and dinosaur cells evolved in very different conditions. If you tried to put dinosaur DNA into a human cell, the cell wouldn't know what to do with it, and it would likely just break down. Creating a new creature with features from both species would require both sets of DNA to communicate and function together, which is extremely unlikely because of how different these two species are. Hybrid animals in nature versus fiction. There are, however, examples of hybrid animals in nature. For instance, we have liggers, that is a mix of a lion and a tiger, and mules, a mix of a horse and a donkey. But in these cases, the animals are very closely related, sharing similar genetic structures. Humans and dinosaurs, on the other hand, are about as unrelated as you can get. We share some basic cellular functions, but beyond that, our DNA is wildly different. So, while hybrids can exist, they almost always happen between very closely related species. When scientists talk about creating hybrids or genetically modified organisms, they are often working with plant or animals that are very genetically similar. Trying to do the same with species as different as humans and dinosaurs would be like trying to cross a fish with tree. It just doesn't work. The science of CRISPR and gene editing. Now you might be wondering, but what about CRISPR? Can't we use gene editing tools to make this happen? CRISPR is indeed a powerful gene editing tool and it's revolutionized our ability to modify DNA. Scientists can cut and paste small segments of DNA to change certain traits. For example, it's been used to modify plants to resist pests and even to cure certain genetic disorder in humans. However, CRISPR still has limits. It's mostly used to make small changes within a single species DNA, not to combine two completely different species DNA. Even with CRISPR, creating a human-dinosaur hybrid would be well beyond our current abilities because it would involve combining too many large sections of DNA. What about cloning dinosaurs? You might have heard about cloning, like with Dolly the sheep, which was the first mammal successfully cloned from an adult cell. Cloning, in theory, could let us recreate a dinosaur if we add intact dinosaur DNA and a closely related living species to act as a host. But as we talked about earlier, we simply don't have dinosaur DNA that's intact enough for cloning. And even if we did, finding a suitable host to carry the dinosaur embryo would be another massive challenge. What would a hybrid even look like? But let's get creative for a moment. What if we could mix human and a dinosaur DNA? What would such a creature even look like? Well, that's hard to say. Would it be a human with scales or a dinosaur with human-like features? These are fun ideas for movies and video games, but in real life, such a creature wouldn't survive because it would likely have a lot of health issues. Even if we could design some creature with both human and dinosaur traits, it's very likely that its organs, bones, and cells wouldn't function properly together. Evolution is a slow process, and living creatures need millions of years to adapt their bodies to their environment. A quick DNA combination would probably lead to more problems than benefits. What are scientists doing now? So, what's actually happening in genetics that close to this idea? Well, scientists are working on something called de-extinction, where they attempt to bring back extinct species that have closer living relatives. For example, researchers are working to bring back the woolly mammoth DNA into elephant DNA. This is possible because elephants and mammoths are closely related, unlike humans and dinosaurs. There is also exciting research in gene therapy, where scientists change parts of human DNA to help cure genetic diseases. But these advances are far more controlled and specific than mixing two vastly different creatures. Conclusion: the bottom line on mixing DNA from different species. There is no practical way to combine the DNA of such different species in a way what would result in a functioning living creature. Plus, we don't even have usable dinosaur DNA to experiment with in the first place. However, science is always moving forward and who knows what the future might hold. For now, though, the idea of mixing human and dinosaur DNA remains firmly in the realm of science fiction. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of genetics and science fiction, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Let us know in the comments if you could combine the DNA of any two animals, which ones would you pick? See you next time. Take care.